common mistakes that buyers and sellers make and how to avoid them. So we're just waiting for Maria to join us. On my side, buyers typically make some mistakes, not intentionally, but when they start looking only online. And a lot of them look only online, and they somehow may miss opportunities to see a property because they just don't schedule an appointment. They base their opinion on what they see online. And often those pictures, there's Maria, we just started.
Hello.
Speaking about common mistakes and we're speaking about buyer mistakes to start with, and things that they really should avoid doing in order to when they're buying the property. So that would be one common mistake that they're. So what I was saying is that very often people look online initially as opposed to, compared to visiting the property. So they make a lot of their decisions on what they see online. And those are often exaggerated photos. Maybe they're old photos and maybe they're not professional ones. So it's something.
Or maybe they're AI photos, right?
Very good point.
Right.
Think of that, right?
I see that more often now than anything, right?
Right. Right. Or they could be staged and people forget to state that they've been virtually staged, which you're supposed to do. So that's a real common mistake I think that buyers make. And I think also many buyers often take advice from the wrong people. They'll just take advice from friends who maybe live in another suburban market, but not the market that they're looking in. And when you take advice from people who really don't know the market, the local market, it becomes, I think it's a difficult situation.
Yes, definitely.
Right. I think that we all see it in terms of people always ask their friends, what they think of an area, or they read a lot online. And while a lot of that information may be accurate, it's not always what's appropriate for that particular local market. And even within a community, there are like sub-communities. And also depending on what you're looking for, whether it be a house or a condo, each area may be a little bit different. And it doesn't really reflect maybe what that buyer is looking for.
Yeah, I feel like even just from a tech standpoint, like not everybody has the same technical skills.
Right.
And if you are solely saying like, I'm just going to look online, you might not see all of the properties that might actually be, that could be of interest to you, just because of your own constraints, either from your devices or from your own knowledge. Or, I know that like most sites tend to, like if it's on Zillow, it'll be on this site and that site, but that's not always the case, right? Like you might have some listings that aren't popping up as easily on some sites. So
right. Also, if you're looking only online, people should keep this in mind that often the information, if it's coming from the multiple listing service through a syndication service, not all the information is transferred, or not all of it's transferred accurately. Right.
Right. I mean, the best way to find out anything is obviously to go to the property, walk the property, do a FOIL request, pull the building department records, but that you get deep in at that point. So
call your real estate agent, right? Have them do the due diligence about the property, right? Because I mean, that's a big part of what, that's what your job is, Michelle, right? I mean, your job is to know, what's right, what's wrong, in regards to, you're going to have much deeper knowledge than I think anything, that's on or you'll have more knowledge of certain properties that are listed too, right? Because more than what might just be, forward facing to the customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you, Marie. That's very often, people only rely on information that they see, and that I think that the other mistake is that many people, especially the younger generations, will choose to start their search on their own. Right? They go to an open house. They go to one open house. They may not be consistent every week looking at properties, and that they are late in retaining an agent, a local realtor who really can help them, who's experienced, who's knowledgeable about the area. They're kind of late in the game. They prefer to do things on their own, and then maybe they'll hire or they'll interact with a local realtor. So I think that waiting too long, especially in this market, which is a very tight market, would be a very big mistake.
I
And
think
I also,
I
go
think
ahead. So,
especially like in our area, and I'm calling our area like New York City, Westchester, Long Island, right? That surrounding area. Because co-ops are so indigenous to our areas, and that's a whole other animal and a whole other dynamic. I've always cautioned, clients that have come to me to get pre-approved, which by the way, like that's another mistake a lot of people do. We can come back to that, but that not getting not knowing what you can qualify for.
And
But
get alive, keeping the pre-approval alive because they expire,
But in
papers
particular,
expire.
with co-ops, I always say, like, make sure you're working with an agent that knows co-ops and that knows, like, I might have
attorneys,
I may
right,
have qualified you for a loan, but like a really good agent knows like what, like this building, they're really, like their requirements are so much more stringent, or, you may not have a shot of like, let's not even bother looking at this building because we're never going to get past the board. And I think that saves people a lot of time and also like a lot of heartache and pain, right? Why bother going somewhere where at the end of the day, you're not going to be able, you're not getting into that board, right? I mean, that still exists very much so.
Very much.
Yeah.
right,
Right.
very much, or some
I mean, it's a
co-op,
little less restrictive, like meaning they have to give you more of a reason now, at least in Westchester County.
Right.
But it's still, if you don't meet the DTI, that you're done. You
Well,
need
yeah,
the money
because,
at a meeting.
right. They may have it published, like, I've seen it. I've seen one just recently where they had to have a debt to income ratio no greater than 23%. Any
right,
lender is going to qualify you up to easily 38, 41, 43, even higher, right? So you might have gotten approved and you think that, hey, I'm good to go. I have got a letter in my hand that says I can
right,
buy this. But you know what? Your debt ratio is at 39%, and this building's only going to allow 25%.
Right.
And right then and there, it's a hard stop, right?
right. You really have to know, and some co-op boards really require money post-closing. So you really have to have a lot of cash on hand, and you have to make sure that everything's liquid in your bank. Uh, Historically, so people are comfortable when you go before the co-op board, that you have all the proper documents and finances in order. Yeah, so it becomes kind of tricky when you're dealing with co-ops. Kind of that adds another layer that you have to pass. So it's a little bit difficult. But I think with buyers, I mean, a lot of these problems, I believe they can be overcome if they really do some due diligence and also know the market that they're looking in and be open to different areas and really know the local market and know their finances and know what they could afford to pay. Right? Some people come to me and they think they could afford to pay a lot more than they really can. So it's very important to have everybody in place, the mortgage broker, the attorney, the home inspector,
Right.
really, so they are really well prepared to make an offer.
And Leslie
So,
brought up a really good point, right? Because you may not find something immediately, right? Maybe you're just getting your feet wet. You want to get out there and start looking and see what's available. And getting, the first step, if you're going to need financing, it's so important, is to make sure that you've gotten pre-approved, right? And pre-approved, with like what I like to call like a real lender, right? Where if you only filled out an application and didn't have to upload any pay stubs or bank statements, like you should be able to be prepared of that pre-approval, right? Because most loans are not very cut and dry. Most people have more to their income than just their pay stub.
Yeah.
But also, like, even once you are pre-approved, making sure that pre-approval stays up to date, because listen, we've been in really low rates have swung from 6% to 7% and upwards, and you may have qualified for $1 million loan 3 months ago, and rates have moved up. Well, they haven't, but I'm just saying rates could have moved up, and you only qualify for a $900,000 loan. So constantly make sure that
you really have to keep that pre-approval updated. That's what we do. But I wanted to just transition to on the was running out of time on the selling side when common mistakes that homeowners make, and I think even one of the biggest mistakes that they make because they think that the market is so robust and so good now and hot that they don't have to do much to their homes to prep it for sale.
Right.
I really believe that even in this market, you have to declutter. You eventually have to get rid of the stuff when you're moving, but you really want to showcase your house in the best possible light. So that means maybe painting, maybe doing small repairs, but really decluttering it and have it show really in a pristine manner. And I think that those sellers who don't do it could be really leaving money on the table.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I know. I think sometimes, right, I'm sure you have it sometimes it might be a hard sell to tell somebody like one of your sellers like, hey, let's spend $10,000 because in the end it's gonna it's gonna be worth it to you, right?
Right.
Because we're gonna be able to, list it for this, like you said, doing painting, doing some, maybe
Minor repairs, right.
repairs, right, things like that.
I think also another mistake that a lot of sellers make is that they'll hire the wrong agent. Maybe they'll hire somebody who will tell them they're going to get a lot more for the house and promise them the moon and the stars, or that they'll be afraid to really confront them because they're personal friends with them. They really need to have somebody who will tell them the truth about the value of the house, as well as in terms of the value and the timing, and just know the local market and know the market that they're in, know the recent sales, know what hasn't sold, just really have a good sense of the market and be able to deal with them in a very upfront, frank manner, not just what the homeowner wants to hear, right? So that's those dynamics, even with the buyer, you want to have a very open and honest relationship with the broker that you hire. I think that's very important.
But real quickly too, right? Because like you mentioned, people starting out online, right? And then maybe they engage a real estate agent. But a lot of times I'm seeing people that are not even engaging a real estate agent, and then they're just using the seller's agent. And now you have nobody that's really representing you and protecting you as the buyer. I
Right.
really think that's I always advise my clients not to do that. I'm like, bring in an agent now, even if it's late, you need to have your own representation.
Right. I definitely do, because they're not really looking at the picture in the same way. So, and especially now with the way the rules are going to change soon, buyers will have to have their own agent, and they're going to pay
Right.
directly to their agent, which is going to make a difference. But
Right.
who knows when that's really what's
August 17th
Yeah.
is the new drop date there, and the final approval before the courts in November. But they expect this to start, whereby that's a whole nother conversation. But
Like,
starting in August, we won't be able to put in, at least if we're members of the National Association of Realtors, to enter into the brokers, the buyer agents compensation. And before you even tour a property, right, take out a buyer, you will have to have some sort of exclusive right to represent agreement stating a begin date and end date, your compensation, and the services that you're providing.
right.
So it should be interesting. The only way a seller really and a homeowner can compensate a buyer's agent is through paying some concession, closing costs, or maybe repairs, or pay them what's called off listing. So we could discuss that on a whole nother
Yeah, I think
Instagram live.
other call about that stuff, and still like a lot to be, I think a lot to see how it all fleshes out as well, right?
Right. Well, it'll be interesting
It'll-
to see.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely. Yes.
and also the new property
Yes,
condition.
there's a lot of different changes that have taken it, it definitely have affected me, the property condition disclosure. Just one of the things I'd say to a seller is really take the time, go through that property condition disclosure, make sure that when you're reviewing it, things that you don't know, you don't guess on. It's
Right.
only what you actually know. And when you fill out that form, you must be very careful about that.
Right.
And if you're not guessing, if you don't know about foundation or you don't know about certain
Don't
things,
guess.
then don't guess. That's the bottom line, And
I don't know, right?
another point is, as a seller, if something changes in the property during the time that you're in contract, you have to update that form. So that's the other thing that a seller has to be aware of.
Oh, that's good. That's something. And also from I'm just obligated to give it to them. Like a client of mine I met with the other day, they said, well, you can help me fill out the form. And honestly, I'm not allowed to.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm just not, they could, ask their attorney, but I'm not allowed to complete the form with them or give them any guidance.
Right.
Excuse me, except stating to do it to the best of your knowledge. So and that's why it's also good to have a realtor and an attorney really when you start the process. So you're not, like in the middle of it and say, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? You really, really should know the rules. And especially if you have to sign up with a realtor before you start seeing properties, you really should understand the process and what it entails, and really what that realtor is going to give you in terms of level of service and the services.
Right.
So I think it's very
Yep.
important.
All really important stuff.
Yes.
Right?
Great.
So any other questions, any other statements, feel free to email us. And we look forward to seeing you next Friday, and have a great weekend, and next week's Memorial Day, or in a week from now.
Yeah. Have a great
Have a great one.
one.
Bye.